So King Hezekiah has been a breath of fresh air on the throne of Judah, the southern kingdom of Judah. He brought the people back to the Lord. He's one of the best kings Israel or Judah has ever had. And yet there's been a little bit of trouble during his reign. It's been maybe a couple weeks here to try to refresh your memory a little bit. The Assyrians, they came in and invaded. Let's see here. Yeah, the Assyrians are off this map, but they came in and from up in these parts, came in and invaded the land, and they took down the Syrians, and they took down the Israelites, and some of these other places kind of capitulated to them, and really at this point, all that's really left is Egypt down here and Jerusalem at one point. And so, they came in, they wanted to take Judah in the south. God protected the city of Jerusalem, and the king of Assyria was forced to go back home where what happened to him? Anyone remember what happened to the king of Assyria? He was killed while he was... What's that? Worshipping in the house of Nisroch, his god. Yeah, which isn't too far off, right? He's basically worshiping a false god. Now, even during those times of trouble, Hezekiah was faithful. The king of Judah was faithful. And he would go to the Lord in prayer, and he would seek after advice from the Lord's prophet, Isaiah. And he trusted in the Lord over and over again. And it paid off for him, even in this life. The last thing we saw was that Hezekiah got sick. And he was told to put his house in order. He was going to die. And he still trusted in the Lord, and he appealed to God for God to heal him. And of course, God did heal him and added 15 years to his life. And so throughout Hezekiah's life, what we've seen is a fairly, not a perfect, but a fairly consistent picture of faithfulness. Again, not perfect. Nobody's perfect. If you try to set someone up as perfect in your eyes, you will get let down. Doesn't matter who it is. You will get let down because there's no perfect people. Hezekiah was not perfect. His life displays imperfection. But what we also see in his life is a consistent picture of faithfulness. Well, the king of Babylon, he hears about, and it's a king that we've never really heard of before, and it's a king that we don't really hear of after. But this king hears about Hezekiah's illness and recovery, and he sends messengers to pay a visit to this newly healed king in verse 12. At that time, Berodach Baladan, a son of Baladan, king of Babylon, sent letters and a present to Hezekiah, for he heard that Hezekiah had been sick. Now, Babylon's far away. Babylon, let's see here. Kingdom of Babylon, here we go. So if Israel is here, and it is, that's kind of modern Israel, Babylon is way over here. And this is what would become, the green area is what would become the Babylonian Empire, but that's not where it is at this moment in time. So where we are right now, we're probably around the year 701 or so. It's about 15 years before Hezekiah dies. These guys don't really become a major empire until a little bit after that. But at the moment, at least they don't end up in this area until a bit after that, over 100 years later. But anyway, from Babylon to Jerusalem is no small journey. This is all desert. This is all desert here. So it's not like you could just, trek across the desert easily. And even if you could, check out the distance here. As the bird flies, 550 miles. As the bird flies. What's 550 miles away from here? Indiana? Okay. What about south? North Carolina? South Carolina? South Carolina, let's say. South Carolina. So try to imagine traveling to South Carolina through desert lands in the ancient world. It's just not going to happen. That's not going to happen. So what they actually ended up doing is they would travel, this is called the Fertile Crescent. Fertile Crescent, because it was fertile. It was fertile. It had rain, and you were able to grow crops, and there were rivers and stuff like that. This is desert. This is fertile. So it's called the Fertile Crescent, or sometimes the Levant, or whatever. Mesopotamia over here, whatever. So they would basically have to travel from Babylon up the Euphrates River and then basically down to Jerusalem this way. And that would make the trip about 750 miles away. So a 750-mile trip based on about, let's call it 17 to 25 miles in a day. We're going to say a month. We're going to say a month if you could travel, fairly quickly. Ezra would make a similar trip, and it would take him almost 4 months to get there. So this is not like a small journey. This is going to take some time. So if you're the king of Jerusalem, and you have a king coming from 750 miles away, or a messenger is coming from 750 miles away, you're not really thinking this is a big threat. Your biggest threat, I mean, the capital of Nineveh, but their empire has definitely, the Assyrians have definitely kind of come into your land. So your biggest threat's the Assyrians. You're not really that super concerned about Babylon. And in fact, Babylon has the same enemy you have, the Assyrians, and the enemy of my enemy is my friend, right? So, this is not like a negative, there's a fair chance there's a political thing going on here between these two places who are kind of like, you have this monster enemy in between you. Chances are Babylon kind of wants to strengthen alliances with Jerusalem so that if there are continued problems with the big cat in the area at the moment, they have an ally. So something like that's what's going on here. Again, probably around the year 701, Hezekiah dies 15 years after that. This king of Babylon is trying to strengthen alliances, and he also, check this out, at that time, Berodach Baladan, a son of Baladan, king of Babylon, sent letters and a present to Hezekiah, for he had heard that Hezekiah had been sick. But he also probably wanted to ask about in 2 Chronicles 32:31, about the wonder that happened in the land, which may have been what we read about last time with the shadow kind of going back 10 steps. So it may have been that. We don't know. We don't know what that is. But here, this king, Merodach Baladan, here called Berodach Baladan, he sends some of his servants with letters and a present. And Hezekiah, when he comes, when these guys come, Hezekiah listened to them and showed them all his treasure house, the silver and the gold and the spices and the precious oil and the house of his armor and all that was found in his treasuries. There was nothing in his house nor in all his dominion that Hezekiah did not show them. Now, I read this a certain way. I read it like Hezekiah being happy to have these guys as guests, and he shows them everything that he has in his house. Kind of like an ancient version of cribs. Cribs? What would be a modern version of Cribs? Cribs is like 20 years old, right? I don't know how old Cribs is. Anyone ever see Cribs? Maybe like Lifestyles of the Rich and Famous with Robin Leach. Anyone remember that one? You remember that. A couple of the older people. That was way better. Look at Donald Trump's yacht. His toilet's worth $15 million, or whatever. Something like that. I don't know. Is there a modern version of Cribs? Social media. They just go into people's houses and invite people and look, can I see your house? Show me your house. How much do you pay for this house? I don't know what it is. Something like this. So we may not think a whole lot of that today. If you get a new house, you buy a new house, and you have a housewarming party or you have guests, you might give them a tour. Now, I'm not really a big tour person. I don't really give tours of my house. I don't know that I've given a tour so much of our house before. I think you have a little bit with certain people. But I do like to give a tour of my office. Nobody cares about it, but I care. And we'll have a guest over, we'll have someone over for dinner, and I'll say, I want to show you my office. This is where the magic happens. This is where, has anyone heard me do that? Mike, I think I did that with you. I might have taken you guys back there. I don't know, but I'll take someone back there and I'll say, take a look. And it's so ridiculous because I got this little room back there, and I'm like, I'm so happy with it. I'm so like, this is my desk. I can sit at my desk and I can stand at my desk. I can do both. And this is the app that I'll use. This is my library, and this is how I write a sermon. And Mike, I've shown you a little bit of the process too, didn't I? I've done this with probably a dozen people, I'm sure, and they probably don't care, but I care. I like doing it, and I like telling people this is where I work. This is how it gets done, because I like my work. I like what I do, but I would say Hezekiah is doing something a little more than that. I would say Hezekiah is taking pride in his accomplishments here, and that takes over a little bit. And 2 Chronicles contributes to that idea a little bit. Now, Hezekiah had immense riches and honor over 2 Chronicles 32. Hezekiah had immense riches and honor, and he made for himself treasuries for silver, gold, precious stones, spices, shields, and all kinds of valuable articles. Storehouses also for the produce of grain, wine, and oil. Pens for all kinds of cattle, and sheepfolds for the flocks. He made cities for himself and acquired flocks and herds in abundance, for God had given him very great wealth. Which reminds me now, when he's taking this stuff and he's showing these people all of his treasure house. Look how much money I got. Look how much silver we have. Look how much gold we have. Look at the oil. Look at this armor. This armor comes from, it's like that type of thing. I don't know. It doesn't say when the armor. This armor comes from the days of David. 300 some years ago. Maybe something like that. What's that remind you of? Just a little bit. Another biblical account. What's that? I can't hear you. Okay. Look at this great kingdom I have built. Okay, I'm thinking, I'm going backwards though. I'm going back before this. Maybe not as bad as this, but similar. I'm thinking Solomon. I get you, I read you. But I'm thinking Solomon as he shows his whole kingdom to the Queen of Sheba. Okay, Queen of Sheba. Something like that. And at the time, Solomon's kingdom was praised for its wealth, and Solomon was praised for his wisdom. But things have changed a little bit in Judah and Israel. Look at verses 14 and 15. Then Isaiah the prophet came to King Hezekiah and said to him, "What did these men say, and from where have they come to you?" I feel like the King James says, "From whence have they come?" Something like that. Anyone have a King James on them? They could look that up. From whence have they come? I feel like it says. What did these men say, and from whence have they come? And is that what it says? From whence came they unto thee? There we go. I wasn't too far off. And Hezekiah said, they have come from a far country, from Babylon. It's far away. It's like, don't worry about it. It's 750 miles away as the foot walks. He said, what have they seen in your house? Isaiah the prophet says, what have they seen in your house? This is the Isaiah. This is the 66 chapters of Isaiah. Isaiah the son of Amoz, Isaiah. He said, major prophet Isaiah, what have they seen in your house? So Hezekiah answered, they have seen all that is in my house. There's nothing among my treasuries that I have not shown them. So Isaiah the prophet comes, and that shows us that's a good thing. I mean, Isaiah the prophet has regular access to the king. That's a good thing. He wants to know who are these men and why have they come? And so Hezekiah tells them, I showed him everything. I showed him all my treasuries. Hezekiah takes so much pride in his kingdom at this point, so much pride in the things that he's accumulated, that he shows the men of Babylon all of it. I've shown them everything. And there are people today that are fairly similar. They take so much pride, so much satisfaction in the things that they own, to the point where you almost wonder if a person's living for those things. You ever meet a person like that? They take so much pride in their possessions. We talked about this during the funeral. You know, one day it all ends. One day you die, and all that stuff that you worked for is meaningless. So live for the right stuff. Don't live for the stuff that perishes. Don't live for the stuff that does not go into eternity. Well, Isaiah knows that this situation isn't right, and he speaks of the judgment that's going to come upon the house of Judah. Then Isaiah said to Hezekiah, hear the word of the Lord. Behold, the days are coming when all that is in your house and all that your fathers have laid up in store to this day will be carried to Babylon. Nothing shall be left, says the Lord. This is what God says. It's not what Isaiah is saying. This is what God's saying. All this stuff is going to be taken away. Fairly similar to the idea we were talking about during that funeral. All this stuff's going to be carried away. Some of your sons who shall issue from you, whom you will beget, who you'll bear, who you'll give birth to. I mean, he's not going to give birth, you know what I mean. Some of those sons, because men can't have babies, right? Can men have babies? Men can't have, listen, peoples online, men can't have babies. Okay, that's not how it works. Take an anatomy class and you'll figure that one out. Some of your sons who shall issue from you, whom you will beget, that's like his progeny, that's like his descendants, they'll be taken away and they will become officials in the palace of the king of Babylon. I mean, this is a pretty serious judgment that's going to be handed out here. Everything that's in Hezekiah's house is going to be taken away. Everything that's part of the royal treasury is going to be taken away, and all of it's going to be taken to Babylon. Not only that, but the royal family itself will be taken into exile, and they'll become servants in the house of Babylon, in the palace of Babylon. Like, this is judgment. Judgment's coming. Judah is going to fall. Now, Judah has recently dodged a major bullet in Assyria, but they're not going to be able to dodge Babylon. Eventually, Jerusalem will fall, and eventually the people will be taken into exile. That's going to happen. Now, it won't happen immediately. It'll actually take over 100 years for Babylon to come and conquer Jerusalem. If we're in 701, it's not going to be until about 587, 586 before Jerusalem fully and finally, before it falls, before Jerusalem is taken. And that will be the end of the Davidic dynasty for the moment. But that will not happen in Hezekiah's lifetime. And for that, Hezekiah is thankful. Look at verse 19. Then Hezekiah said to Isaiah, the word of the Lord which you have spoken is good. For he thought, is it not so if there will be peace and truth in my days? Now, when I read that, it rubs me just a little off. Like, it rubs me just initially, my initial reading, it rubs me just the wrong way a little bit. You guys understand why? Why does it rub you the wrong way just a little bit? Someone tell me what it is about that kind of gets you a little bit.
It's not going to happen in his lifetime, so it's okay.
It's all good. It's all good. I'm not going to experience it, you know. It's like, man, what's good about it? What's good about judgment coming upon Jerusalem? What's good about the end of the Davidic dynasty? What's good about Jerusalem's loss of independence? And yet Hezekiah says, the word which you have spoken is good. Now, maybe it's good that judgment from God is delayed. Okay. Maybe it's good that God will continue to show his grace for a while. That's the only really good thing that I could see at the moment. But maybe in the king's mind, judgment's inevitable. We know it's going to happen. We know what type of people these people are. We know that eventually they're going to fall just like the northern kingdom did. In other words, the writing is on the wall. We know what's going to happen. And the fact that it's not going to happen for much later, that's what's good. I think that's the best we could give Hezekiah at this moment. But it's hard to deny the selfish element that's involved here at some level. At some level, he thinks it's good because, and we see the reason for, because you could insert the word because in there, or for this reason, whatever. Because he thought, listen, it's okay because there's going to be peace and truth in my days. Now again, our initial reading doesn't look so great there. Our initial reading kind of seems like Hezekiah is being selfish. I get that. But I want to say this. Don't be so hard on Hezekiah. Remember, this is a king whose life has generally displayed faithfulness. It may be that he's just seeing the positive side of a situation. Okay, we're looking at a godly king. I really am trying hard to give Hezekiah the benefit of the doubt right now. Maybe it's something like a sentiment that I share, which is like, I would say things like, we will never do such and such a thing in this church as long as I'm the pastor. Maybe it's something like, we will never fall to Baal as long as I'm king. You know, again, I might be reaching a little bit to try to give Hezekiah the benefit of the doubt, trying to interpret the situation in light of a life of godliness from the king. But I've said things like, listen, I can't say what's going to happen in this church after I'm gone, but as long as I have a say, we're not going that direction. I mean, I'm maybe reading it a little bit like that. We're never going to go liberal or woke or compromising or worldly as long as I'm the pastor. I don't know what's going to happen with the next guy, but I know what's going to happen with me. As much as I'll leave before that happens. This church couldn't. A liberal church could not accept me as a pastor, and a pastor like me could not accept a liberal church. These two things just won't work together. So maybe it's something like that. Maybe Hezekiah is happy that there's going to be peace and truth in his days. As long as I'm king, we're never going to be idolatrous. As long as I'm king, we're never going to forsake the Lord and thus incur God's wrath and exile. Maybe that's the way we should be reading it, given the greater context of Hezekiah's life. That's a gracious way of looking at it. That's a positive, hopeful way of looking at it. That being said, it doesn't look good. It doesn't look great. Right? It still kind of rubs me the wrong way a little bit. It's just like, I don't know. Like I'm really working hard to give him the benefit of the doubt. But you know what? If you're honest with yourself, you're probably not a whole lot different. And I'm probably not a whole lot different. For instance, if certain people in our government had their way, people like me would be in jail. They would call it hate speech. And I hate that. I think that's eventually where we're going. Eventually, I'm fairly convinced that eventually Bible preaching becomes hate speech. I mean, I know it happens by revelation. I know it happens. So it's inevitable. They would say, you're discriminating and you're using hate speech. And the fact is, we're spreading a message of God's love, but they reject that message. They want us to accept their false and perverted views or else. I see a time where, in the future, preachers are arrested and thrown in jail for saying things like what I've said from the pulpit. And I think, man, that really stinks for them. But I'm really happy it's not me. Like I'm just telling you how I think. And you probably feel the same. Hey, I'm happy it's not happening right now. I really feel bad for the guys that are coming. But man, I'm thankful. I feel bad for those guys, but I'm thankful that we're not there yet. Come on, tell me you're not there a little bit. Tell me you don't feel that way a little bit. So maybe you shouldn't be so hard on Hezekiah because, again, I feel bad for those faithful ones who will have to endure that, but I don't think it's happening in my lifetime. I don't see it happening in my lifetime. And so there's a sense in which I'm also saying, and you're also saying, at least there will be peace and truth in my days. Agreed? So let's not be so super hard on Hezekiah here, because you'd think the same way at some level. If you say no, then you're probably not being honest with yourself. I get it. It doesn't look great. He shows the Babylonians everything he has. Look at all my silver. Look at all my gold. Look at all this armor. He hears about the judgment of God, and he's happy that it's not going to happen in his days. It doesn't look great. But Hezekiah is not perfect. And neither are you. So let's not hold people to impossible standards of perfection. The point of the passage remains, judgment is coming upon Judah. And then we see the end of Hezekiah's rule. And we've been in Hezekiah's life for a little while now. Now, the rest of the acts of Hezekiah and all his might and how he made the pool and the conduit and brought water into the city, are they not written in the book of the Chronicles of the Kings of Judah? So Hezekiah slept with his fathers, that is, he died, and Manasseh, his son, became king in his place. Now, we've seen some of these accomplishments. We've already talked about Hezekiah's tunnel. We've already talked about how he redirected the water from outside of the city down into the city, into the Gihon spring, into the pool of Siloam. We've already talked about that a few weeks back, maybe a month or so back. And that kept the invading armies from having access to water. Why should these armies have access to water? And that tunnel saved Jerusalem. If he didn't have that tunnel dug, they might not have been able to hold out against the Assyrians. And so it's a major achievement. He did some really good stuff. He did a lot of other things. He led people toward the Lord. He made religious reforms. He repaired the temple. Throughout his life, what we see is an overall picture of faithfulness. And at the same time, we see things about him that don't look so great. We see him for a time paying off the king of Assyria. We see him here showing off his stuff and saying something that doesn't sound amazing. At least there will be peace and truth in my days. I know judgment's coming, but, at least it's not in my lifetime. But if God were to write about your life, do you think there would be some suspect stuff in there? Even after you're a Christian, if God chose to write about some things that you did or said in your life, and everybody got to read about it, it wouldn't be perfect either. So don't be so judgmental about Hezekiah, because we're no better than he is. And he was a faithful king and a godly king who led the people toward the Lord. And then Hezekiah goes the way of all men. He dies. He's buried in the tombs of the son of David. And the people of Jerusalem honor him at his death. And Manasseh, his son, becomes king in his place. And at this point, we've seen that judgment's coming. And the next question we have is, when? We don't know at the moment, as we read through the passage. And what kind of king will Manasseh be? Will he follow in his father's footsteps? Will he be a godly king? We'll find out in the coming weeks. Hezekiah was a godly king who, like all men, falls short of God's glory. Yes, he was a king like David. Yes, he was the best king after David up until now. I mean, you can't really compare anyone else to Hezekiah up to this point. He was one of the greatest kings in the history of mankind. And he was not perfect. Because there's only one king that would be perfect. There's only one person who would be perfect. And that's Jesus Christ, who will eventually sit on the throne of David and rule for 1,000 years. His reign will be perfect. There will be no statements about something that Jesus did or said or will do or say that's sketchy. He will judge in perfect righteousness. And so you need to place your faith in him today in order to be saved from the penalty of your sin and enjoy his rule. And you need to commit your life to him and to his service. But this passage shows us that in spite of having a godly king like Hezekiah, Judgment's coming. It's inevitable for Judah. They're going to be conquered. They're going to be carried away. And this will happen because they forsake the Lord. They forsake the Lord and they face the consequences. And that is something of a warning for us today, too. Look what happens when you forsake the Lord. You will face the consequences. Our nation is forsaking the Lord. And there's some type of a conservative push back towards the right, but it's more political than religious. It's more political than spiritual. It might be religious, but it's not necessarily like genuine Christianity. Our nation in general has forsaken the Lord, and one day it will face the consequences. And you need to remain faithful to Him throughout your life, and you'll avoid the consequences of falling away from Him. That's what I see in this passage. I'm going to have you take your hymnals. We're going to end early tonight. It's been a long day. It's been a long, long day. We're going to take our hymnals and turn to 397 and close our service with a hymn. If you're not sure you're saved, then you be sure and come and talk to me or Brother Metcalf in the back there. We'll get you lined up with someone who could explain the gospel to you more clearly. If you're looking at your life and you're saying, yeah, you know what, I've got some things in my life and I need to repent of those things, then you do that. Or maybe our initial reading of Hezekiah is kind of like, man, look at this guy. What's wrong with this guy? Maybe we need a little bit of an attitude adjustment. Maybe we need a little humility and take a look at our own lives and get things right with God there too. So whatever it is, you do that while we sing 397.